Hey, what's going on, everybody? Brent Hyden here, coming at you on this Wednesday morning, talking tonight's 11-game slate around the association. Before we dig into the slate, quick reminder, please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button down below. Also, if you're not already following me on Twitter or subscribed to my daily content and projections package, my Twitter handle at Brent Hyden1 is in the description down below, as well as my Patreon account. If you head over to my Patreon page, patreon.com/Brent Hyden, you will see some monthly options that you can sign up for my daily content, projections, and Discord, or you can send me a DM over on the Twitter machine and get access for a very affordable one-time price. I'm going to change up the format for this podcast just a little bit. I'm just going to hit on major injury notes and a couple of my top plays from each game, each side of each game, because I already have all of this information in the notes that are provided to you guys already. You can dig into that for all of the advanced stats and things like that. But taking a look at the first game that we're going to talk about, Detroit at Charlotte. This is a game I do have a decent amount of interest in. I think it's going to be overlooked, but Charlotte 5.5-point favorites in this one, 219.5 over under. Stanley Johnson is probable. Reggie Bullock is doubtful. Ish Smith is out. Glenn Robinson is out as well. My first thing of note for the Detroit side of this game, I don't think I'm going to chase the Luke Kennard monster outing from last time out. He's 3,500 on DraftKings, 4,100 on FanDuel. If you want to use him in tournaments, you can. It should be noted that he got a bunch of minutes last game out and had a bunch of extra field goal opportunities because Stanley Johnson was out, Bullock was out, Glenn Robinson was out, Ish was out, and Blake Griffin was out, and Henry Ellenson got hurt in that game. So that was 6 people from that rotation that got shortened. Obviously, with Johnson coming back and Blake Griffin coming back, not going to be as many opportunities for Luke Kennard. He's still fine in tournaments as a value, but not someone that I feel like chasing. There are really 3 options from this side of the game that I absolutely love here, and that starts with Blake Griffin, who just has a monster usage rate when you take Bullock and Glenn Robinson and Ish Smith off the floor. Averages 36.2% usage rate with 1.46 fantasy points per minute. Charlotte does struggle against big men. They are giving up over 46 rebounds per game, 1.03 points per possession on spot ups, and he's post ups, and he's posting up on 30% of his possessions. So I give him the edge over Andre Drummond in this spot, but I do like Andre Drummond a decent amount as he's a little bit cheaper across the industry. 8,700 on DraftKings, 95 on FanDuel. Blake Griffin's 91 over there, so definitely give the edge to Griffin there. But I think both these guys are going to be good options and overlooked here. Reggie Jackson does have like a 26% usage rate and averages 1.04 points per minute. Reggie Jackson is a very, very solid option here, coming in at just 5,400 on DraftKings. He is 5,800 over on FanDuel, so someone that we can definitely consider in this spot as well. Looking at the Charlotte side of things, I do have a lot of interest in Charlotte as well. Most of that comes with Detroit struggling against point guards, ranking 26th in defensive efficiency to the position. Kemba Walker coming off a really strong game against the Knicks, 8,600 over on DraftKings. He's cheap over on FanDuel as well. He's not my favorite point guard option in that same price range. I'll get to who that is in just a little bit, but he's 8,900 on FanDuel. But really, really good spot here for him. Again, I mentioned Detroit ranking 26th in defensive efficiency. His shot profile works out really well in this matchup, so I do like Kemba Walker a significant amount. Marvin Williams, someone to look at outside of that New Orleans game last time, or whenever he got hurt, has been really solid recently, getting you double-digit rebounds in 2 of the last 3, getting you double-digit points in 3 of the last 4. Detroit struggling against guys that shoot corner threes, so he is perfectly fine as a GPP option, mid-range GPP option. Lamb is fine in cash. Zeller, who has been just remarkably consistent, getting you mid-20s, upper 20s in fantasy points, a perfectly fine cash option here. Again, in an attempt to keep this under like 30 minutes each day, I'm going to try to speed through these games. Looking at the Knicks and Cleveland, news did come out that David Fizdale is likely going to start Kevin Knox, which has me a little less interested in him, but I'll get to that in just a moment. David Nwaba is questionable. Lance Thomas is out. Kevin Love obviously out. Trey Burke is out. Tristan Thompson, who got hurt last time out, going to miss 2 to 4 weeks. He is out for this game, and Alonzo Trier out for this game. I do have a lot of interest in both sides here. Opponents are averaging 117.3 points per game against the Knicks over their last 4-game losing streak, so that's interesting. And one guy that I absolutely love in this spot, I'll get to in the Cleveland spot, but Larry Nance Jr. Coming off season high 16 points in his last game, his 4th straight double-digit effort. And then looking at Tim Hardaway Jr., has scored at least 20 points in 4 of his last 5 contests, and he did perform really well against Cleveland last season when these teams played, and he is the first guy that I'm going to talk about here from the Knicks side of this game. I have a lot of interest in him. Cleveland just really getting torched by shooting guards. They rank 23rd in defensive efficiency to the position. He's affordably priced across the industry. It is a little bit tough to trust, but he is someone that I still have a lot of interest in. Has a 31% usage rate whenever you take Burke and Trier off the floor. Cleveland allowing shooting guards to shoot 44% from the floor, 34% from 3. If he's consistently getting you 20 plus points most nights with obviously double-digit field goal attempts and a high usage, Tim Hardaway Jr. is someone to definitely consider here. When you take Tristan Thompson off the floor, Cleveland just atrocious on the boards. 24.7% offensive rebound rate, 27.7% defensive rebounding rate. Enes Kanter, a fantastic tournament option here tonight. Just a smash spot for him, so I like him in tournaments. No Vonleh continues to be a consistent guy. Has had a couple of down games recently, but most nights consistently getting you upper 20s with upside. So Noah Vonleh is someone that I really, really like in cash. And then Emmanuel Mudiay and Frank Ntilikina should split the point guard minutes somewhat equally. I expect it to be 28 for Mudiay and 20 for Ntilikina. This is a really good spot for both. I still think Mudiay is fine in cash, but Frank Ntilikina, 3,300 on DraftKings, 3,500 on FanDuel, fine tournament option. Obviously, Mudiay coming off a couple down games, only 19 minutes against Charlotte, but double-digit field goal attempts is really appealing in the spot against Cleveland. And then I mentioned Kevin Knox. 12% of his shots are corner threes, 29% coming at the rim, has enjoyed a 26% usage rate when you take Trey Burke and Alonzo Trier off the floor. Let me give you guys a little peek here. Let's pull up his usage and production whenever you put him in that lineup with Hardaway, Kanter, Mudiay, Vonleh. So let's put these 5 together and let's see how he does. Probably don't have a very large sample size for him. Only 27 minutes. 27% usage rate, 0.80 fantasy points per minute. So that's still pretty solid. Again, very, very small sample, but Kevin Knox, someone I think he's going to be very popular. He's fine in cash tournaments, especially large field tournaments. I would probably be looking elsewhere. You can sprinkle in some Mario Hezonja, Dotson, Courtney Lee, guys that you can sprinkle in, especially Lee and Hezonja on FanDuel, where they can be your drop score. Looking at the Cleveland side, obviously Tristan Thompson being out basically locks Larry Nance Jr. into a lot of minutes most nights. Assuming this game stays close, he should see well over 30 minutes. Just a great spot here for him. Knicks giving up 46 rebounds, 14 second chance points, and 52 points in the paint. Going to be a core option for me. I'm completely fine eating the chalk. He averages over a fantasy point per minute whenever you take Tristan Thompson off the floor. Jaron Blossom his game has blossomed, and he has been a very decent option for the Cavaliers recently. He is 3,400 on DraftKings. He's very, very cheap over on FanDuel as well. I'm perfectly fine with him in tournaments as a value option, punt option on DraftKings, and again over on FanDuel where he can drop his score. He is just 3,900, a very good small forward punt option here. Cedi Osman is fine in cash. I prefer him in tournaments just because he's very, very unpredictable. He does have upside. Most nights he's going to get you in the mid 20s, which is fine. So again, he's fine in cash, just not that appealing. And then Alec Burks and Colin Sexton, two really, really solid options here. Burks does take the majority of his shots at the rim or in the paint or on above the break threes, which is areas the Knicks struggle to defend. Both guys should play still a heap of minutes, and obviously we'll see a boost if Nwaba or Hood or someone else misses this game. So two guys that I do have interest in here tonight. Looking at the next game, Milwaukee at Indiana. Milwaukee 2-point favorites in this game, 217.5 over under. Honestly, this game's not as appealing as it should be. Oladipo's questionable. Giannis is going to play. He missed last game with some neck soreness. It was against Cleveland, and they just didn't really need him. Oladipo, if he plays, is going to be limited minutes. It kind of takes the shine off of most of these guys if he's going to play limited minutes. I don't mind looking at Darren Collison, assuming if Oladipo doesn't go, Darren Collison's perfectly fine. Does have a 37% assist rate over the last 10 games. 42% of his shots come in the paint or the mid-range. Those are areas we love to attack Milwaukee. Unfortunately, if Oladipo comes back, Collison at his current price tag was $6,700 and $6,500, just too expensive. A lot of these guys are just going to be too expensive if Oladipo does indeed come back. Miles Turner gets a boost with Oladipo off the floor. It's tough to trust him at his current price tag. Again, if Oladipo comes back, not someone that I have a lot of interest in. I don't hate going to Sabonis in tournaments. Has not been very, very good recently, but should still see a decent amount of usage on that second unit and is in a good spot here. Thaddeus Young and Bojan Bogdanovic, two guys that are cash viable, I think, regardless of Oladipo's status. Thaddeus Young, my reasoning on that one is he's just going to play a ton of minutes to be the primary defender on Giannis. Obviously not a great matchup for him, but this is a spot where you just kind of take the minutes and use him in cash if you need to. Giannis on the Milwaukee side of things is perfectly fine in all formats. I generally don't like taking him in games in matchups against teams that are really, really good at defending the rim, which Indiana is. They're allowing opponents to shoot just 59.7% at the rim. I do have more interest in a couple of the other options here, and that starts with Malcolm Brogdon. 33% of his field goal attempts are three-pointers. Indiana really, really struggling to defend the three-point line. Malcolm Brogdon continues to be just one of the better cash game options. There's a couple of these mid-range shooting guards that just continue to be really, really strong cash game options night in and night out. Malcolm Brogdon being one of them, just consistently getting you upper 20s into 30s with upside. Has only fallen below 24 or 25 fantasy points once over his last 10 games. Continues to be a really, really solid option. So I have a lot of interest in Malcolm Brogdon in cash. Chris Middleton, who has shot like absolute dog shit recently, shooting just 30% from the floor, 29% from three. He is someone that I have interest in. 51% of his field goal attempts are three-pointers, and again, Indiana allowing small forwards to shoot 42% on three-pointers. So Chris Middleton, a solid option here. Bledsoe's just tournaments for me here tonight. And moving on, Brooklyn at Philly. Jimmy Butler, doubtful for this game. That's going to play a pretty big impact on a lot of things here, but Philly 7.5 point favorites, 221 over under. Centers against Brooklyn. Centers against Brooklyn. That's pretty much all it comes down to. Just play centers against Brooklyn. That's just what you do. Brooklyn ranks 30th in defense efficiency to the position. They're giving up like 25 points, 18 rebounds to the position. You take Jimmy Butler off the floor since November 10th, and Joel Embiid has a almost 40% usage rate and 1.55 fantasy points per minute. So Joel Embiid is a fantastic option here tonight. If you take a look over at the projections, you will see here in just a second that he projects to be a very, very good play. 58 fantasy points, 57 on FanDuel, so just a great option here. Ben Simmons, a guy that does get some extra usage and production with Butler off the floor. He's fine in cash and fine in tournaments. And then TJ McConnell should be in line for some extra minutes as well. I do have a lot of interest in TJ McConnell as a value option here. The rest of the guys, the Wilson Chandlers, the Landry Shamits, the Furkan Korkmazes, they're fine. If you need a value option, I would lean towards Furkan Korkmaz. But you're just whichever one of those guys gets hot is the one that's probably going to get the minutes. And then JJ Redick, another guy that I like to touch on as cash game guy, just consistently getting you mid 20s, upper 20s, even into the 30s most nights. So perfectly fine here. Looking at D'Angelo Russell coming in at 7,500 on DraftKings. He's, I believe, 7,500 on FanDuel as well. Pretty good spot for him. I've highlighted him the 2 times that these teams have played. 7,100 on FanDuel. Guy takes a lot of shots in the mid-range. 43% of his shots come there. Philly is struggling to defend in the mid-range. He has a 31% use rate over the last 10 games. So D'Angelo Russell, a guy I really, really like here, especially in tournaments, spotting up 21.6% of his possessions. Philly is allowing 1.11 points per possession on spot ups, so he's fine. Dinwiddie is perfectly fine. He is much like D'Angelo Russell, and he takes a lot of shots in the mid-range, is a good spot up shooter. Can actually get some more assists and things like that than Russell, and he obviously has the narrative going on with his contract situation, so I do like Spencer Dinwiddie in cash. He has performed really well against Philly in 2 games already this season, averaging 34 fantasy points per game. Rondae Hollis-Jefferson is fine in cash. Jared Allen, perfectly fine in tournaments. Moving on to Boston at Washington. This game is pretty tough to break down without Washington news. We have gotten some news out of Boston. Al Horford expected to miss a little bit of time. Aaron Baines is questionable. Gershon Yabusele is going to miss some time. John Wall is probable. Otto Porter questionable. Gordon Hayward is out, and Dwight Howard is out as well. Game, like I said, really, really tough to break this game down without having all of the injury news. If Aaron Baines plays without Horford being out, Aaron Baines, one of the top value options on the slate, he comes in very, very affordable tonight. He is just 4,300 on DraftKings, 3,700 on FanDuel. Again, would be one of the top value options on the slate, given that Washington really just struggles to defend the rim. They can't rebound. Just play Aaron Baines, assuming he's able to go. Kyrie Irving, the one guy that I absolutely love in this spot, going to be a core option for me. Washington ranks 28th in defensive efficiency to point guards on the season. They give up 63% shooting at the rim and 37% on three-pointers. 27% of Kyrie's shots come at the rim, another 36% from 3, 31% usage rates whenever you take Hayward off the floor. Absolutely love Kyrie Irving. Way too cheap over on DraftKings at 8,500 and 8,500 on FanDuel. As far as the rest of the guys go, I do really, really like Jaylen Brown in the spot coming off the bench. Has averaged 21 points per game over the last 3. Just a really, really good usage option off the bench and a fantastic matchup, and he is really cheap. 5,400 on DraftKings, 5,500 on FanDuel. Marcus Morris, a guy, high usage option, averaging over a fantasy point per minute whenever you take Gordon Hayward off the floor, whenever you take Al Horford off the floor. That gives him a little bit of a boost. Absolutely love him in all formats. Jason Tatum, a great tournament option here tonight as well. And then you can sprinkle in some Terry Rozier and Marcus Smart as tournament options, but their prices aren't that appealing here tonight. Looking at the Washington side, the news that John Wall is now probable kind of messes things up. Oubre is really the only guy that I have a significant amount of interest in, just because he's going to be coming off the bench, high usage guy off the bench. Just profiles to be a solid option in this spot. As far as the rest of Washington goes, assuming, I don't know, I'll break it down if Otto Porter gets ruled out. If he gets ruled in, I just don't really care to use anyone from Washington outside of maybe Markieff Morris for the narrative or Kelly Oubre coming off the bench. Again, if Porter or Wall ends up being rolled out, I'll cover that in Discord. There's really no reason to go too in-depth on that here. Looking at the next game, I don't have any interest in really anyone from this game. It's Portland at Memphis. Memphis 3.5 or 3-point favorites, 205.5 over under. Portland coming in on a back-to-back. It's just not a good spot here for Portland. Yusuf Nurkic is appealing in tournaments, I guess. He should get a bunch of minutes here against a big front court in Memphis. Has grabbed total more rebounds in each of his last 4 games. So I guess in tournaments, there's a couple of guys we can look at. In Nurkic being one of them, I guess. It's just 7K against Memphis. I'll find. I'll no, just no. Dame and CJ McCollum, these guys aren't priced where like you're not really getting a discount. 9,200 for Lillard, 6,900 for McCollum. No, I'm not doing it against Memphis. I'll find other ways to get exposure. If I really, really want to from this game, I'll do it with Marc Gasol, who should be a very, very solid tournament option here. Gasol has really struggled recently, but JB Bickerstaff said that he wants to make sure that Marc Gasol gets double-digit field goal attempts every single night. 27% of his possessions are post-ups. Portland struggles against post-ups. He's fine in tournaments. Conley fine in all formats if he plays. He's questionable for this game if he sits. I'll cover in Discord, but you're going to see like Shelvin Mack and Wayne Selden be excellent value options here. The one guy that I think we can look at, especially in cash games, Kyle Anderson. Portland really struggles against small forwards. They're allowing them to shoot really, really, really well. Portland allowing 38.9% shooting on above the break threes. Anderson not taking a lot of those shots, but someone that I do have a little bit of interest in here tonight. Just a really consistent cash game option. Moving on to an appealing game here. OKC at New Orleans. OKC 2-point favorites, 232 over under in this game. Nikola Mirotic is going to be out. Elfrid Payton is questionable. Elfrid Payton is out. Etuan Moore is questionable. Looking at the Oklahoma City side of things, Russell Westbrook continues to just be a monster. Notched another triple-double against the Utah Jazz. But he has not been the best player on the team. Paul George has been the best player on the team recently. Pelicans ranked 26th in defensive efficiency to small forwards, giving up 22.7 points, 7.9 rebounds, 3.6 assists to the position. Paul George, 26.8 points on 17 field goal attempts and 49% shooting over the last 5 games, shooting 41% from 3, averaging 7.6 rebounds, 4.2 assists, and 2.4 steals. I do love Paul George. 9K on DraftKings, 9,100 on FanDuel. Does have upside. Really, really good spot, and he's going to be overlooked in this game. So I really like Paul George. Again, Russell Westbrook perfectly fine in cash and tournaments. This is a smash spot for him. Pelicans really struggling against point guards. He's just 10-9 on DraftKings. That's pretty appealing considering he's been over 11K for quite a while now. So this is a pretty good spot here for Russell Westbrook. 25 minutes, had like almost 40 fantasy points against the Pelicans last time out. Steven Adams has eclipsed 20 points in 3 of the last 4 games, averaging almost 20 points per game over that stretch. Steven Adams perfectly fine in cash, going to play a ton of minutes to match up against a very big front court in the Pelicans. So I like Steven Adams a decent amount, and same with Jeremy Grant, 20% of his field goal attempts. Corner threes, Pelicans allowing 43.3% on corner threes. Looking at the New Orleans side of things, Anthony Davis is Anthony Davis. You can play Anthony Davis if you want to play Anthony Davis. I don't want to play Anthony Davis tonight because I'm going to be playing Julius Randle, who is just 7,400 on DraftKings and 8,800 on FanDuel. Whew, that FanDuel price. Really solid game against OKC last time out. Shot 10 to 10 from the floor, 26 points, 8 rebounds. The reason why I have the most interest in him is because Nikola Mirotic is out tonight. Julius Randle, 28.4% usage rate, 1.32 fantasy points per minute without Mirotic on the floor. Let me go ahead and pull up what he gets, what his usage is in the starting lineup. All right, so we have Philly on here still. So let's see. New Orleans Pelicans. So when we have Davis and Giroux and Randall on the floor, we'll put Etuan Moore in there as well. I don't really care if Tim Frazier's in the query or not. It's 22.4% usage rate, 1.04 fantasy points per minute, so not great, but still decent. Still someone that I have a lot of interest in just because he's going to play a ton of minutes. Really good spot for him. Holiday, excellent spot for him. Let everyone down against Boston. Obviously, as we just saw, 1.23 fantasy points per minute whenever in the starting lineup alongside Randall and Davis. Yeah, just a really, really good spot here. But Randall and Holiday, my favorite options, with Davis coming in third. Moving on, Atlanta, Dallas. This is a very interesting game. This one might take me a few more minutes than I would actually like it to break this down. But Torian Prince is out, Amari Spellman is out, Jeremy Lin is out, Dennis Smith Jr. is out. Yes, Dennis Smith Jr. is out. Miles Plumlee is out. Alex Poitras is out. That is a lot of guys missing from this game. Jesus. Maxi Kleber is questionable. Dirk is questionable. Collins averaging almost 25 points per game across his past 4 games. John Collins, absolute monster, both usage and per minute production whenever you take all of these guys off the floor. 27% usage rate, 1.42 fantasy points per minute. John Collins, a very, very good option here. Dallas, really good against power forwards. But averaging like 21.6 points on 15.2 field goal attempts and 62% shooting over his last 5 games. Still great spot here for John Collins. I do like him. He is very, very expensive though, and that does make it tough to get him in when there's some other options that I would rather have exposure to. But John Collins, very, very good option here. Dwayne Dedmon is fine in cash and GPPs with fewer bodies to back him up. Should get plenty of minutes. But Kent Bazemore, 26% of his field goal attempts are above the break threes. Dallas allowing 38% shooting on above the break threes. He leads the team in fast break points. Dallas really struggling to defend in the fast break. And Kent Bazemore, 21% usage rate, 1.04 fantasy points per minute whenever you take all of these bodies off the floor. 5,500 for Kent Bazemore, 6,600 over on FanDuel. Going to be a very, very attractive option here for me tonight. Trae Young, just GPP option here. Trae Young, just GPPs. Kevin Huerter, averaging 30 minutes per game over his last 5, 24% of his shots come at the rim, with 37% of them on above the break threes. Kevin Huerter, a very, very good value option here. So is DeAndre Bembry. With Dennis Smith Jr. out, Berea's minutes don't necessarily increase. They have a couple of times this season. Other times they did not. But this is a great spot here for JJ Barea. Monster usage, 1.21 fantasy points per minute, 29% usage rate with that second unit. Harrison Barnes, usage boost, 28.8% usage, 0.99 fantasy points per minute. Excellent spot here for Harrison Barnes, who I expect to bounce back after a stretch of just mediocre games, but 6,200, very, very solid cash game option here tonight. Good in tournaments as well. Luka Doncic, shooting guard, small forward eligible on DraftKings, shooting guard on FanDuel. That is somewhat appealing here. 7,300. Hasn't really shown off a ton of upside most nights, but consistently getting you mid to upper 30s with some 40-point potential. So Luka Doncic, 26% usage rate, 1.11 fantasy points per minute. I do kind of like him. 39% of his field goal attempts come in the paint or mid-range. Atlanta allowing 44.6% shooting in the paint and 44% in the mid-range. Jalen Brunson's the guy that I have the most interest in from the Dallas side of this game. Has filled in really well for Dennis Smith Jr. recently. Jalen Brunson, 3,800 on DraftKings. He is 4,500 on FanDuel. But as you can see, 28, 23, 28 fantasy points, 9 field goal attempts in 3 straights. It's a good spot for him. I absolutely love Jalen Brunson in this spot, averaging 14.4 points and 4.7 assists over the time that Dennis Smith Jr. has been out. DeAndre Jordan, 1.19 fantasy points per minute without Dennis Smith Jr. Perfectly fine in all formats. Wesley Matthews, the overlooked guy, I think, in this spot. Against an Atlanta team that is getting torched on 3-pointers, Wesley Matthews, especially at 4,500, very, very, very appealing here tonight. Very, very appealing for Wesley Matthews, who has been shooting really well at home from three. This is a trend that happened last year, last 2 seasons actually. He shot really well at home, not as good on the road. But yeah, Wesley Matthews, great option here. Miami at Utah. Whiteside not expected to join the team. That has me again interested in Bam Adebayo. Outside of Bam, this is not really a spot where I have a ton of interest in. You can look at, like I said, you can look at Bam Adebayo in cash and tournaments. A little bit pricey, but still a pretty solid spot for him at 6,100 on DraftKings. He is fine, again, in all formats. Utah has struggled at times against big men this season. Winslow has been on fire recently. Has scored at least 20 points in 3 straight games, averaging 23 points per game during his hot streak. 36% of his field goal attempts come in the paint or the mid-range. Utah allowing 43% shooting in those areas. Justice Winslow is fine. I don't want to chase the big games, though, especially not against Utah. So, yeah, I'm just not going to do that. But if you want to use him in tournaments, feel free. Looking at Utah side of things, Mitchell's fine in cash and tournaments. Gobert, really tough to trust given all the stuff that's going on with him. Mostly the foul trouble stuff, where he's getting ejected. He's literally targeting refs. Like, he is going out and saying that he's going to get revenge because of all these bad calls. He's going to take matters into his own hands. That's very concerning. But yeah, he's fine in tournaments. Miami giving up 15.7 second chance points per game. Minnesota at Sacramento. Robert Covington is probable for this game. Looking at the Minnesota side of things, Towns, 4 consecutive double-doubles, averaging 27.3 points and 11 rebounds over his last 4 games. Karl-Anthony Towns in a very, very good spot here tonight. Sacramento giving up 47.4 rebounds, 14.5 second chance points, 52 points in the paint. I love Karl-Anthony Towns. The problem is, at his current price tag, it's really tough for me to prioritize him over Joel Embiid. Like, Karl-Anthony Towns at 10K on DraftKings, 9,700 on FanDuel is not very appealing whenever I can get Joel Embiid for 10.5. But if you're doing like a 2-center lineup, or you're trying to pay up at center and pivot from Embiid, he's a fine tournament option there. Outside of that, I do really love Covington here. Listed as probable, should play a ton of minutes. Good cash game option here. Taj is fine in cash. Wiggins is perfectly fine in tournaments. Wiggins, a guy at 6,300, priced up for the matchup a little bit, but he's perfectly fine. Just taking a lot of shots, playing a lot of minutes. It is nice to see him getting some rebounds, so I do kind of like Wiggins here. Derrick Rose, intriguing here. Sacramento, 66.2% shooting at the rim. Derrick Rose at 5,800, coming off a really solid stretch of outings, going to play a decent amount of minutes. And then Jeff Teague is fine in cash. On the Sacramento side of things, I'm going to cover my favorite play here, and then the rest of these guys, again, you can read the notes for who I have interest in. Again, trying to keep this a little bit short, but also trying to make sure that you guys digest all of this information that I put time and effort into writing, instead of just not paying any attention to it. The guy that I do have the most interest in, however, is Iman Shumpert here tonight. Minnesota ranks 30th in defensive efficiency to small forwards. That is where Shumpert is spending the majority of his time this season, allowing them to shoot 44.8% from the floor, 40% from 3. Additionally, they're allowing 40.2% on corner threes, where Shumpert is taking 20% of his field goal attempts. I've been outside of Oklahoma City, for whatever reason, Shumpert has just torched Oklahoma City, but I've been able to predict a lot of these Shumpert games. He did have a really good outing against this team last time out, 26 fantasy points. I'm going back to the well with Shumpert being one of my favorite value options on the slate. Again, the rest of the guys, you can check the notes for who I like on there. Looking at the last game of the night, Toronto at Golden State. Golden State, 6.5 point favorites, 228 over under in the spots. Kawhi Leonard is questionable. Kawhi Leonard was very close to being cleared for back-to-backs. Actually, it was expected in this back-to-back that he was going to be able to suit up, but he is dealing with a hip injury. It's not just they didn't just rest him last night. He actually did take a really hard fall against Milwaukee, and did hurt his hip. But really, the status of Kawhi plays a pretty big impact on both sides of this game. He's fine in cash and tournaments if he plays. 29.2% usage rate on the season, averaging 28 points on 51% field goal percentage and 42% from three, to go along with his 8.3 rebounds and 2.8 assists over the last 10. Serge and Siakam are fine in cash, but with Draymond Green being back, that does hurt them a little bit. But if Kawhi Leonard is out, both of those guys get a boost. Both of those guys you have to consider. Kyle Lowry, not someone that's on my radar, unless Leonard is out. But Danny Green's someone that I do have a lot of interest in cash and tournaments. In the spot, going to play a ton of minutes, be one of the primary defenders on a couple of high usage guards. So Danny Green, a very, very good way to get cheap exposure to this game. Any other changes, I'll update in Discord though. Curry, been really, really good recently, averaging 31.4 points and has made 29 of his last 56 3-point attempts. And that includes a 42-point effort against the Cavaliers. Stephen Curry, my favorite way to get exposure in this spot tonight. Toronto they struggle a little bit against the pick and roll. They struggle against transition. That gives Curry a little bit of a boost. Obviously, again, the status of Kawhi Leonard playing a big role in how we can attack this game. But Kevin Durant also would be someone to definitely consider here. We saw him light it up last time these teams played, but he's back under 10K, 9,600, pretty appealing here for Kevin Durant, who still going to take a lot of shots, still has some rebounding potential, and again, 57% of his shots come in the mid-range. Toronto allowing 42% shooting in the mid-range. He's also someone that sees a boost with Toronto struggling a little bit to defend and transition. Draymond Green came back last game. 31 fantasy points in 29 minutes against Minnesota. He would be a very, very good, cheap way to get exposure to this game. Both sides, 6,600 on DraftKings, 6,700 on FanDuel, fine in cash and tournaments. And then Klay Thompson is available in GPPs, and Reggie Bullock is now questionable after being listed as doubtful last game. Stanley Johnson, a game-time decision after being listed as probable. Good job, NBA injury reporting. So yeah, that does it for the slate. 11 games. Again, trying to keep this under 30 minutes. Unfortunately, did not make that goal this time. For those of you that do not normally read the notes, again, I will reiterate, like, everything that I say in this podcast is in the notes. So I'm going to try to get you guys to look at that content, because I do spend hours upon hours putting that content together, and it does feel kind of shitty whenever you guys don't click on that stuff and at least read it. I've highlighted in yellow and blue the relevant information, so please take the time to read and digest that information, as I am going to try to keep this podcast pretty short going forward. But I will be back tomorrow for tomorrow's slate. Good luck in all of your contests tonight.